for our audiences, say one thing that I was informed about that came out of the mouth of Galibaf, the speaker of Iranian Majlis, the parliament. And the issue was pushed by the Americans that, oh, we don't want you to acquire a nuclear device. I mean, pushed and pushed and pushed again and again and again. And finally, Galibaf, through the Pakistani, said, we do not need a nuclear device. We are sitting on a nuclear device. We are sitting on a nuclear device, the Strait of Hormuz. And this is a bigger nuclear device than any that we could build. And you are here because you are being impacted by this device. Okay, for my global audiences, I am very pleased, very, very pleased to welcome a dear friend, Vijay Prashad, whom I fully hope and expect to have as a founding member of our very significant new channel that is growing very, very well. We have amassed maybe 200,000 views in the last 8 days after we did extraordinarily well with the previous channel, but were cut off on the request of the US government because we had the audacity of reporting some news which happened to be true. But neither here nor there. I am happy to welcome back to our show Vijay Prashad, who has been traveling the world. And I am very, very anxious to hear what he has to say about the changed nature of the world since he left this country. So, Vijay Prashad, welcome to Transition Protocol. This is our new name because we are witnessing the transition of the way things used to be to the way things will be. And no one better to say it than you. So please go ahead and tell me everything that our audiences all over the world, we are now being translated in many languages, Vijay, professionally. Got a really good offer from somebody in Europe, and he's translating us in about 9 European languages. Very professional.
Wow. Wow. Well, it's a pleasure to be with you. And I mean, the first thing I will say is I spent, and tomorrow I return to the African continent, but I spent a great deal of time on the African continent in Kenya, in Burkina Faso, in Ghana, in South Africa. And the mood that's growing among ordinary people is deeply shaped by their antipathy to Western colonialism. I mean, it was extraordinary to see in Kenya when the governments welcomed Emmanuel Macron. I mean, it's absurd how there was a France Africa summit. You know, France is a tiny parochial country, Africa is a very large continent, and yet there was a France Africa summit. You know, extraordinarily arrogant of the French to organize it like that. And having first organized it like that, and when criticism began to mount, they called it Africa Forward Summit. They changed the name in a kind of acknowledgement of their diminished stature. But from Kenya to have gone to Burkina Faso, where the Burkinabe people have thrown out the French, they've ejected French military bases from Mali, Niger, from Burkina Faso, to feel the sense of independence of the Burkinabe people, you know, extremely poor, their wealth stolen by French colonialism, and yet extremely dignified and desirous of creating their own destiny. From there, I went to Ghana, where you see, even though the government of John Mahama is a very progressive government, they're still a little caught up with the fact that they have a US base at the airport, that the grip of the United States still there in Ghana, in parts of West Africa, where the US and France are trying to put the squeeze on countries like Burkina Faso, from Kenya on one side, Ghana on the other. You know, Africa is going through an enormous turmoil, lots of changes afoot, but it's very difficult because these are relatively poor countries, you know, poor in terms of their monetary capacity, and that diminishes their ability to fight off against Western creditors, who are the main lenders to these countries, net borrowers of money in order to pay for their oil bills, to pay for food imports, and so on. So, the capacity to fight off Western creditors, to fight off Western imperialism is slightly diminished. But you see the desire to go into the transition into a new world. You see the desire. It's everywhere.
Vijay, I'm so thrilled to hear that. I'm absolutely thrilled to hear that because what I have to report while you were gone something very, very, very similar. I want to give a little background to some of our audiences who may not be fully aware as to why this channel came about, why we chose the guest that we have, and what it is that we are doing. Uh, Even though I've lived in this country for about 50 years and I have been part of, unfortunately, the post Bretton Woods regime, because I have taken part in many of those structures that were founded, I have come to regret my work in that capacity. And one of the desires that I had was to expose the absolute oppressive nature of that particular regime, and my happiness at seeing that gradually crack. So I have maintained very good relationship with Pakistan and many places where I have worked. And fortunately, because of the fact that I'm also from Pakistan, originally I'm from India, same place you are. We are all from the same place. But the political division was that my parents came to Pakistan, but I came here when I was 17 years old. I maintained very good relationships, and I was very privileged to obtain very sensitive but very accurate information about how things were moving with Iran. Iran being a major West Asian country and being attacked by two nuclear powers. Uh, According to everybody that I worked with, I consulted with, was a signal to the world that the world is now going to change. The United States is not going to succeed in breaking Iran, even though it had been the subject of severe sanctions for 47 years. And eventually, what will happen is what it is that we see today.
Hmm.
I mean, it has not come to pass, but we believe it is going to come to pass. And when it does, the world will be a very different place. Now, needless to mention that behind all of this, Pakistan is only the front. There is China,
Hmm.
and there is the significant blessing of Russia. So it is China and Russia that are emerging as the major powers in the global south, challenging the hegemony of the United States that has prevailed for the last, I would say, 75 years, post World War II. So that is what it is that I have witnessed, Vijay, up close, up front, and very privileged to have some direct information from people at the table.
I mean, if you think about it, Zulfikar, if you think about it, the sensibility in the world today, the sensibility is that whether the United States was ever interested in solving people's problems or not is not the issue. This is not a question of intention. Was colonialism, did it intend to actually bring civilization? Did the United States actually intend to have development? Intention is not the issue any longer. The issue now is that it is very clear that the United States and Europe simply don't have the capacity to assist countries with their development agenda. It simply doesn't have the capacity. The US does not have the ability to drive investment capital towards development goals. It's a different matter if Elon Musk wants to offshore data centers, let's say to the Sahel region of Africa, that's a different issue, because Elon Musk offshoring a data center to El Salvador, to somewhere else in Africa, not just the Sahel, but maybe in Senegal, that is for profit. That is not to improve people's lives. It's not for the development agenda for the people of El Salvador. It's very clear to people around the world that when investment comes from, the world's first trillionaire, for instance, it's not for their benefit. He's not providing Starlink across the African continent for the development goals of African countries. He's providing it for his own necessity of profit. So that is now clarified. The intention of these countries' agendas is irrelevant. What's relevant is the outcomes are for profit towards people like Mr. Musk or Peter Thiel, not for the development agenda of the people. So then the question arises: well, who's going to drive the development agenda? The eradication of illiteracy, emancipation of people from starvation, improvement of water quality, and so on and so forth. Whether it's in Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Senegal, or El Salvador, it doesn't matter. Who's going to drive that agenda? Well, let's face it, yeah, we haven't looked ourselves in the mirror and said, this is our issue, that the people of Senegal need to derive a development agenda, that they have to look for international partners who are sincere about getting us out of development. Right now, the situation is pretty dire in many countries in terms of having our own development theories, having our own development projects. It's very clear that if you're going to look for financing for this, you're not going to get it from the Europeans or the US. You're going to have to look to the new emerging countries, the BRICS plus powers. You're going to have to look particularly at the Chinese. What are they going to offer on the table? Again, Zulfiqar, you and I, we are not naive people. We know that even Chinese investment funding, it's not coming for humanitarian purposes. They also need to recycle their surplus. They have their own interests at play. But we need to sit at the table and say, wait a minute, if you're going to invest in our country, what do we get out of it? I understand what you want to get out of it. You have a necessity to recycle your surplus. But what are we getting out of it? Well, we don't want to pay 7% interest on it. We are willing to pay 3%. We need to learn to negotiate with people who are coming into our countries, not just be happy and say, please bring foreign direct investment. You can take it out whenever you want. No, you come in at 3%, but there are capital controls. This investment is going to be locked in for 5 years. You can't take it out after 3 months. Sorry. Regardless of the changes in interest rates in different countries, you have to lock in your investment. You are investing in our country. You're not investing merely as hot money. These are the kinds of debates and discussions that we really need to have. This is not what the International Monetary Fund is provoking. They are saying, liberalize finance, let it come and go as it will. How does that benefit a country? So I think there's a new maturity developing. Countries are saying, wait a minute, we don't think the International Monetary Fund is correct. I have a book coming out this month with the Zambian economist Grieve Chelwa called How the International Monetary Fund Strangles Africa. And by the way, it's very important to say that it's in the present tense. How the International Monetary Fund strangles Africa. Not strangled Africa, but strangles, because it continues to do so. We need a new platform, a new way to talk about how development will happen. That's what people are interested in, Zulfikar. They are not interested, frankly, in yesterday's issue of plunder. They don't want their countries plundered. They want to have control over their resources. So that's the real debate. And whether it's Pakistan, regardless of how shabby the leadership is, we can talk at length about the shabbiness of the elite of countries like Pakistan. I mean, just embarrassingly shabby elite. We need a new leadership in our countries that's able to stand up for our own people. median age of countries like Pakistan has been dropping into the early 20s. This geriatric leadership simply doesn't understand the needs of its public. They need to be replaced by a different kind of leadership. And I'm very sorry to say, you and I haven't personally discussed how you feel about Imran Khan, but I mean, I'm very sorry to say that just because you had disagreements with Imran Khan, I'm talking to the Pakistani elites now, that doesn't mean you shove this guy in prison and put him in such bad condition he loses eyesight. He still has the capacity to mobilize, hundreds of millions of young people, and I think those young people need to be listened to one way or the other.
I totally 1 million% agree with everything that you just said. Everything that you just said, and my feelings about Imran Khan are equally as strong as your feelings. And it is my hope that one day he will emerge and be back in power. When I say that Pakistan has done a few good things on the international scene, those are things that most people know. I happen to know a little bit of insight of what has happened just because of my relationship. That does not in any way condone the the totally shabby manner in which they hang on to power. I mean, that is the unfortunate reality of not only Pakistan but also the entire Gulf region, perhaps in maybe in a worse way than what is going on in Pakistan, because at least some leadership changes in Pakistan in a few years, but in the Gulf region, it is considered to be a hereditary situation where you inherit power and you just hang on to power. But I am happy to report, Vijay, that people like you and the voices that you have raised are now being listened to. See, I'm old enough to remember the way things were. I was one of the very first senior, extraordinarily privileged consultant to all three networks when every single broadcast was listened to by 30, 40 million people, including CNN. I was at, I had done some algorithmic work, which I continue to do, and they needed me in terms of how to improve their audiences. So I remember those times in the early 70s. But that model has shattered, thankfully. Now, many, many, many voices are being heard, and they are being heard loudly and clearly. And you are one of those voices, and I'm so privileged to have you on this platform. And the reason why this platform is exists is to enhance the thoughts that you express and to distribute them widely. So I believe, and I also travel and I also listen, I also have a lot of interactions. Things are changing. The leadership today in that region that we are talking about, Eurasia, Middle East, West Asia, is not the same as what it was before. Even like 10 years ago, things are completely changing. And in my view, 10 years from today, certainly 20 years from today, things will be very different. And I am hoping that voices like yours will help shape what comes up next.
Oh, listen, I'm of the view that these sorts of platforms that we are going to build together, these platforms are where people are going to be able to get not only in. I mean, it's not only a question of information. I think this is something that we have to also think seriously about. The divide between news and opinion was quite deliberately fostered. They channels like BBC and CNN and so on, they said, oh no, we don't do opinion when we broadcast news, we just broadcast the news. That is not true. They shape public opinion by pretending in a way to be completely unbiased and so on. It's not true that BBC is unbiased. I mean, we now have memorandum circulated by the senior leadership saying you can't call what's happening in Palestine a genocide. How is that unbiased news? That itself is filtered. That's that's creating or constituting a view of the genocide as being not a genocide. I mean, that itself is totally an opinion, not unbiased news. I mean, I have been of the view as a reporter for many years that we need to create a new kind of attitude towards the world. It's not unbiased, nor is it biased. It comes to you. It's genuine reporting with a set of values. And we need to be open about the values we espouse. We espouse values that believe in human emancipation, that human beings should not be forever in positions of hunger and in positions of illiteracy. There's nothing wrong with talking about the world from a standpoint, but the standpoint must be made very clear. It is an anti-colonial standpoint. It is a standpoint for human emancipation. Once the values are put on the table, well, here's what we are experiencing in the world. This is what we are seeing. The reason I'm interested in what's happening with the formation of new kinds of international relations, or of new kinds of equilibrium as they develop. The reason I'm interested in that, what happened, for instance, at the last BRICS Plus summit, or why is France interested in entering Kenya? It's not a French speaking African country. Why are they holding their so-called Africa Forward summit there? These questions are motivated by the ideas of human emancipation. They are not motivated by some pretend, unbiased, whatever, so-called pretend BBC or l'Agence France, the whatever it is, Agence France Presse. I mean, we are not motivated by any pretense that we don't have values. They pretend they don't have values, but in fact, end of the day, their values are the old colonial values, that they believe they know better than the people of Zimbabwe, and that they should lecture to the people of Zimbabwe about land transfers and the transformation of the land question in Zimbabwe. BBC basically went on a rampage for 2 decades against Robert Mugabe's government, because his government had the temerity to put on the table the idea that white settler land had to be redistributed to black farmers, and for that, they just went on a rampage against him. They basically set the stage for the sanctions against Zimbabwe. How is that unbiased reporting? That was biased reporting on behalf of the white settlers in Zimbabwe, in what used to be called Rhodesia, named after Cecil Rhodes. I mean, so I am interested in a different kind of journalism, a different kind of reporting, not one that pretends to be unbiased, but is actually totally biased, totally colonial, but a reporting that actually says, look, we are in favor of the emancipation of the vast human majority, and our stories are going to come from that standpoint. Take it or leave it. Argue with the bias if you want, but that's where it comes from. And that, I think, is much more honest reporting than reporting that pretends to be biased, pretends to be above, opinion, but in fact is saturated with opinion. So I think if that's what we're going to create, that's something that people will appreciate. But let me also say that doesn't mean that you just make things up. I mean, this is not that. This is not the reporting of illusion. This is the reporting of reality. And in that sense, I say take it or leave it. It doesn't come from, people merely making things up on the fly, reporters that are not out there building stories, talking to people, learning things, and so on. This is reporting rooted in public understanding of issues, but it's really the other side of the coin, isn't it? It's not the side of the coin that when you flip it, it comes to king. Yeah, it comes to the king, because that's the BBC and their reporting. It's the king's viewpoint. When you flip the coin and it lands, it comes tails, which is the people. And I think we report tails, not kings. We report tails.
Amen, amen. And that is the reason why this is being done. As everybody knows in this audience, hopefully, my field is finance, and I have been reasonably successful in that. But I decided to do this because I had an opportunity to tell some truths that were not being told, privileged information that I felt needed to be get out, and I was asked specifically by that source to collect a group of people that they respected, and you are one of them, which in by name, that if you can organize a group like that, we will support it, and that is why we are here. And we unfortunately felt the hard acts of the government. In fact, we were told that on the request of the U.S. government, our previous channel that had been doing really well was shut down. But this channel, legally created after that, is doing actually even better. So it's hard to put truth down. When the truth is on your side, it's really difficult to get it down. I was a student during the 60s when all of the protests against Vietnam was going on. So I have a long history with this, and it is my hope that we will continue to do this. And that is the reason I requested you to be a founding member of this enterprise, and I'm so thrilled that you kindly decided to accept. So we will be here once a week, every week, telling our truth and telling our audiences that are global in every part of the world as to what we believe is happening with
Mm,
the people in the world, not necessarily what the rulers of the world are hoping to accomplish, or not necessarily what the United States wishes to get done, or the
mm.
Europeans need to get done. We see that fracturing badly. And with this West Asia situation, with Iran taking place right now, uh, I believe that it's going to fracture even at a greater speed than most people expect. What do you expect will be the outcome of all this, Vijay?
Well, I mean, if you take the case of Iran right now, firstly, I think one has to keep reminding people that the United States and Israel conducted an illegal war of aggression against the Iranian people. There's no United Nations Security Council resolution under Chapter 7 that authorized this armed attack against a sovereign state of the UN and so on. I mean, I think it's important to keep reminding people this is a totally illegal war, and that if we had a Nuremberg trial today, at Nuremberg, the Nazis were convicted not of the crime of the Holocaust or anything, they were convicted of a war of aggression. And that's exactly what the United States and Israel launched on Iran. There would be people who would be hanging from a noose for this war of aggression. And it's important to first say that. But having launched their war, it's quite clear that the United States and Israel had a strategic defeat because Iran was able to demonstrate to the Gulf Arab states that they had made a bad bet by believing that if they were in the arms of the United States and with this US security agenda, that they would somehow be protected. They were not protected. This was not protection. And I think Qatar, the Emiratis, and others have had to acknowledge that Iran is strategically in a much stronger position by restricting ships through the Strait of Hormuz. I think Iran demonstrated that, look, you can't actually force us with armed force to allow the strait to be opened. We control it. And therefore, we are going to now exercise control over it, which they had not previously. They had not charged fees, they had not restricted access, but now the United States has basically forced Iran into a position where it can demonstrate to the world that they have power over the international energy supply, which means have power over international fertilizer supply, because so many of the fertilizer key products are basically auxiliaries of the production of petroleum. So Iran has suddenly demonstrated that they have the world by the throat. And the United States has actually forced Iran into a position where it had to do that. I mean, Iran was not interested in exercising power over the world economy, but the United States forced it into that position. So this is a major strategic victory for Iran, without a doubt. I don't think anybody denies that. Even the Financial Times has been writing along that vein, that Iran has actually demonstrated that it is strategically much stronger than the United States, that Mr. Trump has had to sue for peace out of weakness, not from strength. Whatever he says doesn't matter. He's going to say whatever he wants at the G7 meeting in Europe. He can brag however much he wants. But the fact of the matter is, this is a big strategic victory for the Iranians. So that's one side of it. The other side of it is that, of course, despite not having to enter the conflict directly in any way, I mean, the Chinese have sat out of the conflict in Ukraine, they have sat out of the conflict in Iran. But nonetheless, this is an enormous victory for China, because the Chinese are the major economic partner of Iran, major economic partner of Russia. And the Chinese are going to gain across Asia, if not other parts of the world, as a consequence of this strategic loss to the United States. About 200 years ago, the major northern or Colombian Venezuelan general Simon Bolivar said that we need a new equilibrium in the world, that the order is not correct, a new equilibrium is needed. I really like this term equilibrium. I think we need a new equilibrium now. And I think the Chinese, the Iranians, and others and the Russians are producing a new equilibrium for the world order. I am not very keen on the term multipolarity. I'm not keen on it because I don't think countries like China or Iran want to see the world divided into spheres, into blocks, into various poles. The Chinese have just released a document on the global governance issue, and they come out very strongly against the block mentality. It reminded me of Jawaharlal Nehru's speeches in the 1950s against the creation of the Manila Pact, Seattle, and the Baghdad Pact, CENTO. Jawaharlal Nehru said we should not be part of these colonial and imperial, blocks in the world. We don't want to divide up the world into blocks. What we want is a new equilibrium, a new multilateral system. And so I'm looking forward to the time when the whole world, not one pole or another pole, but the whole world is balanced in a new equilibrium, which is committed to peace and development and not to war and austerity. And I think, the US imposed war of aggression on Iran has resulted in the beginning, again, another beginning of the creation of a new equilibrium. And I'm really quite happy about that. I mean, it coming at great cost to the Iranian people, I should say.
Well, Vijay, I should I totally applaud everything that you just said and completely agree with it. But I want to, for our audiences, say one thing that I was informed about that came out of the mouth of Ghalibaf, the speaker of Iranian Majlis, the parliament. And the issue was pushed by the Americans that, oh, we don't want you to acquire a nuclear device. I mean, pushed and pushed and pushed again and again and again. And finally, Ghalibaf, through the Pakistani, said, we do not need a nuclear device. We are sitting on a nuclear device. We are sitting on a nuclear device, the Strait of Hormuz. And this is a bigger nuclear device than any that we could build. And you are here because you are being impacted by this device. And I think this is perfect. I think this is an absolute perfect encapsulation of the power of Iran, coming at a great cost, but they did manage to defeat two nuclear powers. And as a result thereof, it is my belief, and you are the scholar because you have studied this far more than I have. that the world is definitely going to change.
Yeah, just to pick up on this is an amazingly powerful anecdote, because what this suggests to us is that Iran had thought through what in military science is known as the escalation ladder. The Iranians had thought through this. You know, what is an escalation ladder? Okay, a conflict starts. You don't want to escalate all the way to the top. You know, you want to slowly inflict pain on your enemy, and you inflict sufficient pain that they say, well, maybe this conflict is not worth it. You know, maybe we shouldn't have got into this conflict. United States came in with Israel and hit hard. This has become the signature of the United States since at least the first Gulf War. Come in and just hit hard. You know, shock and awe was the second Gulf War, but just come in and bomb the cities and create maximum pain. You know, maximum pressure, maximum. This is a US strategy. Okay, they came in, they bombed Iran hard. They killed 150 schoolgirls, in a bombing of a school and so on. Very hard. But the Iranians were interesting. They continued on the escalation ladder. They first struck radar sites in the Gulf Arab states where the United States had radar installations. You see, they could very easily have immediately told their friends in Iraq, go crazy and bomb the US bases, but they held them back. They held back their various allies in the region. You know, they didn't scream and shout to the Ansar Allah group in Yemen and say, launch all your missiles. No, no, they waited. They hit these radar facilities. They made it clear we know where they are, we can strike them. United States comes back, hits hard again. Then the Israelis strike. Then they go and hit Israel. They strike targets in Israel. Israel is surprised that Iranian missiles could get through the Iron Dome shield. Then they strike the bases in the Gulf Arab states. You see, this form of going up the escalation ladder was very interesting because they didn't restrict the Strait of Hormuz immediately. You know, not on the first day. They waited. They did these other things. Yeah. Then they closed the Strait of Hormuz to US and US allied traffic. When they did that, they had a squeeze. Now, they still had further to go on the escalation ladder. They could have, for instance, struck oil facilities of the Qataris. They could have destroyed their facilities for natural gas. They didn't touch those. Yeah, just as the US couldn't really touch Iran's nuclear energy facilities either. The United States held back because they knew that if they hit, Qajar Island, for instance, then the Iranians are going to wipe out the Qatari, natural gas fields. So the escalation ladder was very well handled by the Iranians. And so at the end of the day, they didn't even call upon their friends in Iraq and other places to strike US bases. They didn't need it. They didn't need it. The United States already discovered, well, look, they can go further. We can't. United States had already gone maximum pressure. What's next? A nuclear bomb on Tehran? There was no escalation. But the Iranians were clever. They escalated, they talked to the Pakistanis, they talked to the Omanis, they were ready to negotiate, but not to surrender because they had further to go in the escalation. They could have hit Israel much harder, but they waited. They put the Lebanese question on the table. They had a lot of space to negotiate. See, a clever negotiator doesn't put all their cards on the table. And a clever negotiator doesn't take the bazooka out on the first day. Yeah, they don't do that. The first day, they say, I have a little knife. They put it on the table. They say, that's what I have. Yeah, they don't show everything. And at the end of the day, the one thing that they had showed the world, which they didn't use, were their small boats. I don't know if you remember the video that the Iranians released a couple of years ago, which showed their undersea caves where they hide all their small boats and their undersea capabilities, the little undersea vessels that can go in from underwater attack, one hulled oil tankers. Oil tankers have one hull. Because if you have a double hull tanker, it's extremely heavy. So anyway, the point is they had all this stuff that they didn't use. they had them in check. The US knew they had them. They were not using. That's the escalation ladder. I think the Iranians extremely soberly went up the ladder. The other thing is, in France, Trump said, we wiped out one set of leaders, we wiped out a second set of leaders. The third set, he said, they are reasonable, good negotiators. Okay. What he didn't say in that is Iran, unlike many countries, has 7 or 8 layers of leadership ready to take over. Yeah. So when the US went and killed Ali Khamenei and killed this leader of the IRGC, there's leaders and leaders and leaders. They've trained for this. That is a very sophisticated operation they are running.
Vijay, this to respond to Mr. Trump, he got rid of the old, very aged Khamenei, and in his place, he now has a much younger Khamenei with much more rigid ideology. So that is what he has accomplished.
Yeah, I mean, he's making fun of the younger Ali Khamenei. Yeah, he's making fun of him. Trump has been
Yeah.
making jokes about him, and so you can make any jokes you want. What do they say in the playground? Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words don't harm me. Yeah, you can make any jokes about him, but you don't have any sticks and stones to deal with him. Yeah, your sticks and stones have not been able to accomplish their task. You dropped your sticks, you dropped your stones. Iran is still standing. 100 million people, a great civilization. And by the way, it's interesting. People talk about Shiism. That's what, it's not Shiism. Very wrong idea. Of course, Shiism plays a role in this, but it's also Iran's 3-4 thousand years of unbroken civilization. They didn't experience colonialism like we did. India, Pakistan, you add up the Shia population, it's a very large population. I think India is the second largest Shia population in the world. Yeah, but the Shia population of India, for instance, the Lucknow world, was totally destroyed by colonialism. Yeah, it was totally destroyed by colonialism. Those were the Nawabs of Uttar Pradesh. If you ever seen Satyajit Ray's movie Satranj Ki Khilari or read the story by Premchand, it's a terrific story. That's the moment of the fall of the Awadh kings. I mean, we experienced colonialism. Our dignity was, in that sense, compromised a little bit. Iranians never experienced direct colonialism. That's an enormous, thing to bear in mind. Same with the Chinese; it was indirect colonialism. Their sense of the historical past is unbroken. Our sense of the historical past was slightly broken by colonialism. And you got to give it to the Iranians, that sense that they have of the vitality of their culture. It's something else. Yeah, it's something else.
Vijay, before we go, and thank you so much for your kind, time that you have given to us for this very, very extraordinarily illuminating discussion. I have one final question to ask you, and this comes based upon again some privileged information that I have. Uh, the information was provided to me 3 days ago, 4 days ago, as to why the Islamabad summit was not being held in Islamabad.
Hmm.
I mean, because until then, everybody was talking about the Islamabad summit, the Islamabad Accord. So I was told from this very reliable source that because this source sits on top of an intelligence organization that's 10,000 persons strong, very professional, very reputable, recognized worldwide. They had intelligence that Israel was planning on an assassination, uh, uh, action like they have done in the past. The targets could have included Galibaf, or I mean somebody like as with that kind of stature. So I was told that the decision was made by the Pakistanis and the Qataris because they were brought into confidence on this. That well, let's go. We have a resort in Israel, in Switzerland. It's in the mountains, very difficult to get to. You can be the host. Now, what is Israel trying to accomplish? I mean, I'll make this the last question to probe your intellect, Vijay. What are they trying to
No,
do?
no, no. Let's recognize one thing. When we were younger, we were fed the myth of Israeli intelligence, Mossad, and what happened in Entebbe, and that Mossad knows everything, and Mossad can kill people anywhere in the world, and we were fed this. This was part of the propaganda of the Israeli government to make this invincible state, with a great intelligence service and so on. It's garbage. Their intelligence is not that great. They've made a lot of mistakes. We can make books about Mossad's failures as much as their successes. The reason we know that they have also lots of failures is that's why they use brute force. If they were so good at intelligence, why would they need to use brute force? They could surgically just keep killing all the leaders of Hamas and so on. No, they use brute force. They come in and wipe out an entire neighborhood. They don't know exactly where people are. They kill 10,000 people to get one person. How is that good intelligence? Yeah. So we are fed this myth of Israeli intelligence. They are desperate right now. They don't have any strategic cards. They know the United States needs to make a deal with the Iranians. This is going to leave Netanyahu in the cold. Yeah, they know that Hezbollah is still standing in Lebanon. Yeah, and the US is going to say you've got to stop your adventure in Lebanon. Hezbollah is still standing. Iran is still standing. It's not likely that the government in Syria is going to last very long. Whether by ballot or by bullet, that government may not last long. Hamas may be completely eroded, but something is going to reappear among the Palestinians. The Palestinians are going nowhere. Netanyahu has gained nothing from the genocide and nothing from the illegal war in Iran. So they are desperate. This is an act of desperation, not an act of intelligence. It's not intelligent to come to Islamabad and kill an Iranian.
Ghalibaf,
That's not intelligent. That's an
the head
act
of
of
Islam,
desperation.
the head of Iranian Majlis.
Yeah, that is an act of desperation, not of intelligence. The Israelis are desperate because they are losing. They are losing across the board, and I think we need to recognize that. And also we need to walk back this idea of Masada. The myths that were created in the 1970s of invincible Israel and intelligent Israel. It's not intelligent. Mr. Netanyahu is not an intelligent person. He is a brute force leader. He leads by brute force in the country and against the people they are occupying. In other words, the Palestinians. This would have been an act of great folly and desperation had they conducted this operation against Pakistan. I mean, imagine how the Pakistani people would have reacted. Already, dignity of Pakistan slightly compromised by the US raid on Abbottabad to get Osama bin Laden. Now, to come in and kill the leader of the Iranian Majlis on Pakistani soil, I mean, where would the people go? The killing of bin Laden in Pakistan actually creates the basis for the rise of Imran Khan. Had they conducted another operation like this with the permission maybe of the Pakistani government, the government would have fallen and a new movement would have arisen. And I don't know what the politics of that new movement would have been, but it would not have necessarily been very good for the world.
Well, uh, thank you for that analysis. Just for the record, the person who relayed this to me said that the reaction of the government of Pakistan was so severe that a formal communication was provided to Israel, to Netanyahu, that you try this. The reaction is not going to come from Iran; it's going to come from Pakistan, and you're not going to like it.
I
So,
mean,
nobody was in support of this action. Nobody. It's stupid.
that's frankly, that's I'm stunned to hear this news. But anyway,
Well,
uh,
this is news directly from the source. somebody who was at the table when this happened, and it still is actually at the table.
Okay, that's amazing.
So I totally enjoyed this conversation, Vijay. And you said you're going to Africa tomorrow.
Yes, tomorrow.
When are you coming back?
No, no, I'm on the road for the next 2 months. Forget it. I'm going to have to do a transition protocol on the road. Get used to it. Yeah.
Oh, no, that is perfectly fine with us. But are you prepared to give a time when this? Because we want to establish a certain time when our audiences can look forward to hearing this.
Yeah, yeah. We're going to set a time. It'll be probably on Thursday, I think.
Okay,
Maybe Thursday.
should I just work with Soledad on that?
Yeah, yeah. Just set a time. And
Okay.
wherever I am in the world, I'll, in middle
Okay.
of the night, whatever it is.
All you need to do is have a camera and a mic, and this Riverside studio is available to you.
Yeah.
Any place in the world.
Okay. We're ready to go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much,
All
and
right.
you are so much welcome. Not only by myself, but by the other members, founding members. You know, some of them may be Larry Johnson
Yeah, and Pepe
and Pepe
Escobar. You know,
Pepe
one
Escobar.
day, Zulfikar, one day early in the next couple of weeks, we should have a show with all of us on to talk about transition protocol.
I will try to arrange that. I mean, they know that you were invited. They were very thrilled about that. They were very thrilled to welcome you, and so I will put that up, and we will arrange
Okay.
that. Thank you so much. Thank you again.
Thanks a
I'm going
lot.
to
Take care
stop
of
this,
yourself.
but don't shut this down at your end until this uploads at your end.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
because it
yeah.